The rain fell like molten silver on the cobblestone highway, and Kale's merchant wagon groaned under the weight of silk and spices destined for the royal capital. His callous hands gripped the reins as thunder split the sky, the horse's eyes rolling white with fear. 30 years of traveling these cursed roads had taught him one lesson: trust nothing that moves in darkness. The bandits emerged like specters from the downpour. 5 of them, their faces wrapped in cloth stained with blood and dirt. The leader, a scarred brute named Gravid, grinned with teeth like broken gravestones. "Your gold or your life, merchant," he growled, raising a rusted blade. Kale had faced death 100 times. He'd learned to meet it with dignity, to hand over his goods and escape with his skin. But tonight, something shifted in the rain, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. She appeared between the bandits and Kale's wagon, and for a moment he thought the storm had conjured an apparition, a girl, barely old enough to be called a woman, with hair the color of autumn leaves and eyes like liquid amber. Her form seemed to shimmer, as if she weren't entirely present in this world. Across her back, 2 foxtails swayed in the rain. Not an illusion, not a trick of the light, but real. The bandits laughed until she moved. Her hands traced patterns in the air, and the magic that erupted was wrong, ancient and wild, pulling light from the darkness itself. 3 of them fell screaming, their bodies convulsing as ethereal flames consumed them from the inside. The other 2 ran, without looking back. Gravis stood alone, his courage draining like water through cracked stone. She pointed one delicate finger, and he collapsed, tears streaming down his weathered face, lost in some nightmare only she could inflict. Then she stumbled. Her amber eyes fluttered, and she crumpled to the muddy road like a puppet with severed strings. Blood dripped from her nose, her ears. Whatever magic she'd used had burned through her like a flame consuming dry wood. Kale should have left her there, should have driven on to the capital, reported nothing to the authorities, and forgotten her name. Instead, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and carried her to his wagon. Her fever burned through the night, and he found himself speaking to her sleeping face, telling her about the merchant routes, about cities he'd never seen, about the solitary life he'd built. When she woke 3 days later, her fox ears twitched with fear. "Where?" she whispered, her voice hoarse as gravel. "Safe?" Kale said, offering her water. "At least for now." She stared at him with those luminous eyes, searching for deception, for danger. Whatever she found satisfied her, because she drank deeply. "I'm Vex," she said finally, "and you've made a terrible, terrible mistake saving me." Kale didn't answer. He was already beginning to understand that sometimes the heart makes choices a mind cannot justify. He'd heard the ancient stories of the beast clans, of magic that could reshape kingdoms. But looking at this fragile girl, all he could see was someone hunted, broken, afraid. He pulled a blanket over her shoulders and watched the rain fall outside the wagon. In the morning, the wanted posters would begin appearing. The posting of her face on every town's message board made it real in a way Kale couldn't ignore. Sought, beast of unknown origin, magical threat to the crown. Reward, 10,000 gold crowns. Her picture was crude but recognizable. Those fox ears, those eyes that seemed to glow even in the crude drawing. Someone had given a terrifyingly accurate description. They traveled by night now, avoiding the main roads. Vex recovered slowly, her strength returning in small increments. During the day, while Kale navigated winding forest paths, she would sit in the back of the wagon, watching the world with a wariness that broke his heart. She rarely spoke of her past, answering his gentle questions with silence or cryptic half-truths. It was on the 4th night that he finally pushed her for answers. They'd stopped in a hidden grove near the ruins of an old stone temple, far enough from civilization that Kale felt he could breathe. He prepared a meal, simple bread and dried meat, and sat beside her near the fire. "Tell me," he said quietly, "tell me who you really are. If I'm to protect you, I need to know what I'm protecting against." Vex stared into the flames, her fox ears flicking with agitation. "My father was a king of the eastern beast clans," she said finally, "a lineage older than your kingdom's existence. When the current king, Matthias, came to power 10 years ago, he wanted to consolidate all magic under his control. He called it stabilization. My people called it genocide. Her voice cracked. He invaded our ancestral lands with human soldiers blessed by the royal mages. My mother fought. My father died holding the palace gates. My brothers... She trailed off, her small hands clenching into fists. I was the youngest, hidden away in the deepest chamber. The family seer managed to smuggle me out, gave me a charm of invisibility. I've been running ever since, living in the spaces between towns, learning to hide who I am. But he still knows you exist, Kale said, understanding dawning. That's why the reward is so high. I carry the bloodline, Vex whispered. The original magic, the power that the beast clans use to shape mountains and redirect rivers. It sleeps in my blood, dormant but powerful. The ritual to awaken it requires willingness, something my family never broke under torture. But the current king doesn't want me dead. He wants to capture me, bind me, and force me to unlock that power for him. She looked at Kale, and her eyes were ancient and sad. With what I could do, he could remake the world in his image. Kale felt the weight of her revelation settle on his shoulders like a crown of lead. Then we need to get you to the wildlands, he said, to the places a king's reach can't extend. It will take weeks, months, perhaps. You would do that? She asked, wonder crossing her face. For a stranger? For someone who brings this danger down upon you? He reached out and gently touched her cheek, feeling the soft warmth of her skin, the delicate structure of her face. I would do that, he confirmed. I've spent 30 years with no one, Vex. No family, no ties, nothing but the road. Maybe I saved you because in saving you, I saved myself from the loneliness. She leaned into his touch, and for the first time since he'd found her, she didn't look afraid. My people used to say that when the bonds between two souls intertwine, fate becomes negotiable. Perhaps. She paused, swallowing hard. Perhaps this was meant to be. Kale drew her close, his weather hands gentle in her fox-colored hair. When he kissed her, it felt like setting fire to a bridge, burning away his old life, his solitude, his carefully constructed walls. Her lips were soft and warm, tasting of honey and autumn rain. She made a small, vulnerable sound and wrapped her arms around his neck. And in that moment, the entire kingdom could have been burning, and he wouldn't have cared. That night, they made love in the back of the wagon with a tenderness born of desperation. His scarred hands learned the geography of her body, gentle despite their roughness. She trembled beneath him, not with fear but with emotion so profound it seemed to shake her entire being. When she cried out his name, it sounded like a prayer, an offering to something sacred and ancient. They lay entwined afterward, her fox ears tucked beneath his chin, her heartbeat synchronizing with his own. I love you, she whispered. I shouldn't. It's dangerous. But I do. Then we'll be dangerous together, Kale promised, and sealed it with a kiss to her forehead. By morning, royal scouts had found their trail. The chase was about to begin in earnest. The knights came at dawn, their armor singing with the morning light. Kale had barely finished hitching the horses when Vex's ears went rigid. We have minutes, she said, her voice steady despite the fear flashing in her eyes. Maybe less. They rode hard through the forest, branches whipping at the wagon's sides, tearing at the canvas. Behind them, he could hear the thunder of hooves, the sharp calls of the hunt. Kale had never run before in his life, had never needed to, but for her, he would run to the world's end. Over 3 weeks, they traversed lands that seemed to live on the borderline between civilization and wildness. Kale used every trick from 30 years of traveling, hidden roads, sympathetic innkeepers, disguises that transformed Vex into a servant, a peasant, a mute girl bound to a stern merchant. Each transformation cost her something. He could see it in the way her shoulders sank, in the brief moments when her fox ears flickered with the effort of suppression. They passed through the city of Thornhaven, where the plague had taken half the population, and the survivors wandered like ghosts through crumbling streets. Kale purchased medicine with gold that should have been his retirement, and they moved through the city unseen. That night, Vex was sick with fever again. Whether from the stress or from proximity to so much death, Kale couldn't tell. He held her through the darkness, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. In the ruined temple district of Asarath, something miraculous happened. They were being hunted by a particularly relentless squadron of knights, elite guards who'd been on their trail for days. As they moved through the broken stone corridors of an ancient temple, Vex suddenly stopped. Her ears extended fully, her eyes opening wide, and she made a sound like wind chimes of storm. The temple itself seemed to answer. Massive stone beasts carved into walls, old guardian spirits, remnants of her people's dominion, came alive. Not fully, but awakening in fragments. A crumbled lion raised its head. A serpent coiled with renewed purpose. The knights fled screaming, and Vex collapsed into Kale's arms. "The blood is waking," she gasped. "I can feel it," reaching out. "The magic wants to protect me. If we don't reach the wildlands soon..." She didn't finish, but didn't need to. In a quiet village on the edge of the settled lands, where the king's authority was already becoming whispered legend rather than law, they paused to resupply. It was in a small tavern called the Wanderer's Rest that they had one perfect night, the eye of the hurricane. Kale bought them wine that tasted of honey and summer. They sat by the fireplace, and for the first time, Vex smiled. A real smile, not born of desperation, but of genuine joy. She told him stories of her childhood, of running through the crystal caves of her father's kingdom, of learning to weave magic like others learned to sew. He told her about the merchant routes, the strange cities he'd visited, the small kindnesses that had kept him alive through 3 decades of loneliness. Later, in their rented room, he made love to her with a slower intensity than before. Not the frantic passion of the first time, but something deeper, a conversation between their bodies, each touch saying, "I choose you," again and again. She rode him with surprising boldness, her hands braced on his chest, her fox ears twitching with pleasure, her breath coming in gasps of his name. When she came, she threw her head back and made that beautiful wind chime sound, and Kale felt something within him transform. He was no longer just a merchant. He was a guardian, a lover, a man willing to burn the world down to keep her safe. They woke tangled together, and she traced the scars on his chest, asking how he got each one. He told her, and she kissed each scar like she could heal the old wounds. "No more scars after this," she promised. "No more running. No more fear." But the next morning, a messenger brought word. The king had declared them both enemies of the state. The bounty on Vex had doubled, and the king himself was marching north with the royal legion. They left immediately, Vex driving the wagon with surprising skill while Kale watched the roads behind them. The end game was approaching, and all the perfection of their stolen moments would soon be tested against the full might of a kingdom's wrath. The wildlands announced themselves not with gradual transition, but with a sudden severance, as if they crossed an invisible line that separated the civilized world from something far more primal. The trees grew impossibly tall, their bark silver as moonlight. The air tasted of ozone and ancient magic, and the beasts began to appear. A wolf pack with eyes of amber, the same color as Vex, emerged from a mist. They circled the wagon, but when Vex descended and made that wind chime sound, they bowed, literally bowed their great heads in deference. More creatures came. A white stag with antlers that seemed to contain starlight, a massive bear that moved with impossible grace, birds that sang in harmonic frequencies that made Kale's teeth ache. They formed an honor guard around them, a living bulwark against the kingdom's pursuit. They remember, Vex said, tears streaming down her face. "My grandmother's grandmother ruled these lands. The magic remembers her blood." They made camp in a valley surrounded by ancient stones carved with a language Kale couldn't read. Vex explained that these were seals, magical boundaries that would make it difficult for the king's forces to proceed. But she was worried. If Matthias comes himself, she said, if he brings enough power. She didn't need to finish. That night, they lay under stars that seemed far brighter here, in this liminal space between worlds. Kale held her, feeling her heart race with anxiety and anticipation. "I've been thinking about something," he said softly, running his fingers through her hair. "About who I want to be." Vex tilted her head, those beautiful ears rotating toward him. "What do you mean?" "I've been a merchant all my life. A neutral observer, moving to the world without touching it. But meeting you, he kissed her forehead, that's changed everything. If the king wants to take you from me, then I'll stand against him, not as a merchant, but as a man who has found something worth fighting for. She sat up, her body silhouetted against the stars. Kale, what you're saying. I'm saying I love you, he interrupted. I'm saying I'll be whatever you need me to be. A merchant, a warrior, an exile. I'm saying let's not run anymore. Let's stand together and let him come. Vex leaned down and kissed him with an intensity that felt like the entire world was condensing into that single point of contact. She undressed him slowly, reverently, and when she took him inside her, it felt different. Sacred somehow, a binding deeper than physical. She rode him with purpose, her magic flickering around them both in tiny sparks of amber and gold. When she orgasmed, she screamed his name to the sky, and somewhere in the wilderness, the animals answered with their own cries. Then she did something new. She took his hands and pressed them to her chest, right over her heart. Feel that? She whispered. That's not just my heartbeat. That's the old magic, the bloodline magic. It's been waking up since the moment I met you. It wants to manifest. It wants to fight. Then let it. Kale said, I'm not afraid. She smiled sadly. You should be. They came the next day. Tens of thousands of them. Foot soldiers, cavalry, mages, knights. The royal legions marched into the wildlands like an invasion force, and the ancient seals shattered under the weight of their combined power. King Matthias himself rode at the front, a tall man with cruel features and eyes that burned with a hunger for dominion. Kale stood beside Vex as they emerged from the forest to face the assembled host. The beasts of the wildlands gathered behind them, a council of ancient creatures, bristling with power. Vex Fox's ears extended fully, her eyes burning with amber light. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to echo from the earth itself. I am Vex of the Eastern Beast Clans. This land is my heritage. These creatures are my people, and I will not be bound by you, Matthias. I will not let you enslave the magic of creation itself. The king laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Last chance, girl. Come willingly, or watch everyone you care about die. Kale felt Vex take his hand. Her grip was strong, certain. Then we fight, she said. Together. As the army surged forward, Vex opened herself completely to the ancient bloodline magic. The transformation was stunning and terrible, her form shifting between human and fox, between solid and ethereal. The magic erupted from her like a tidal wave, and for just a moment, Kale saw what she truly was. A force of nature, ancient and primal and absolutely unstoppable. The king's forces fell back, shocked by power they'd never anticipated. But Matthias himself advanced, drawing on deep wells of stolen magic, wards that had cost thousands to forge. The clash between them shook the earth. Kale, despite his vow to stand beside her, found himself knocked backward by the sheer force of the magical confrontation. And then something shifted. Vex reached out, not to attack, but to heal the land itself. She showed Matthias the true cost of his power. The lives consumed to feed his ambition, the magic corrupted and twisted, the world slowly dying under the weight of his reign. Something in the king's eyes flickered. For just a moment, he seemed to truly see, to understand, really understand, the damage he'd caused. His magic wavered. It was enough. Vex's power, pure and ancient and righteous, swept through him like light through shadow. He fell to his knees, not dead but broken, his stolen power evaporating like morning mist. The armies fell back in chaos. Their king was defeated, their leader diminished. As they retreated, Vex swayed and collapsed into Kale's arms. She'd given everything, burned through reserves of power that would take years to recover. Sleep now, Kale whispered, cradling her against his chest. Sleep, love. You've saved us all. The kingdom fell into chaos in the aftermath. Without Matthias's iron grip, the royal court fractured into factions. Some sought retribution for the monster that had defeated their king. Others, shocked by revelations of his crimes, began to question everything. The news spread like wildfire that a girl with fox ears had shattered the king's power, that the ancient magic was real, that the world was far stranger and more wondrous than they'd been taught. Vex slept for 3 days and 3 nights, her body recovering from expenditure. Kale sat by her side the entire time, watching her chest rise and fall, marveling at the delicate curve of her face. When she finally woke, her eyes were clearer than he'd ever seen them. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," Kale corrected, kissing her forehead. "I just carried supplies." She laughed, a genuine laugh that filled him with a joy so complete it felt dangerous. "No, you did more than that. You carried me when I couldn't walk. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You chose me when the world demanded you turn away." She sat up slowly, her fox ears twitching as she tested her magic. "I can feel it now. My connection to this land, to the creatures, to the ancient bloodline. It's not separate from me anymore. It's part of who I am." Over the following weeks, they built a life in the wildlands. Not a simple life, but one rich with purpose. Refugees began to arrive. Members of the beast clans who'd gone into hiding, mages who'd been persecuted under Matthias's reign. People seeking a place where magic was accepted rather than feared. Vex became their leader not through conquest, but through genuine care for their well-being. Kale, surprisingly, became her advisor and her rock. The merchant who'd spent 30 years isolated found himself part of community. He helped organize trade routes, manage resources, serve as a bridge between the wildlands and the kingdoms beyond. The merchant who'd known only the road had finally found home. But it was on a night 3 months later, standing at the border between the wildlands and the settled kingdoms, that everything crystallized. The royal forces had finally rallied under a new leader, someone younger, less corrupted, willing to negotiate rather than dominate. But they still faced the border of the wildlands, still uncertain of what lay beyond. Vex and Kale stood together as the armies massed on the horizon. Behind them, creatures and people alike began to gather. The final confrontation seemed imminent, but Vex didn't draw her power. Instead, she took Kale's hand and walked toward the approaching armies, her fox ears held high, her head unbowed. The new king, a man named Aldrich, rode forward alone to meet them. "So the legend is true," he said, dismounting with respect. "The fox girl who broke the tyrant." "I am," Vex said simply, "and this is my people." She gestured to the multitude behind her. "We don't want war. We want recognition. We want the right to exist, to practice our magic, to live our lives without fear of persecution." Aldrich studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That seems reasonable. Perhaps it's time the kingdom learned that magic and strength take many forms." And just like that, the conflict was averted, not through violence, but through the courage to stand and the willingness to be seen. Over the following hours, negotiations began, real negotiations between equals. The wildlands would remain sovereign. Trade would be reestablished. Understanding would be fostered. That night, Kale and Vex returned to their home, a beautiful structure built from living wood and stone, magic and craftsmanship intertwined. Vex had insisted on designing it herself, wanting a place that reflected both her wild heritage and her new love for Kale. The bed was enormous and comfortable, and they took advantage of that comfort extensively. He made love to her slowly, reverently, his scarred merchant's hands gentle against her soft skin. She arched beneath him, her fox ears flattening with pleasure, her tails wrapping around them both like they were trying to bind him to her forever. "I want to marry you," he said against her neck. "Not because we must, but because I want to stand in front of everyone and claim you as mine while you claim me as yours." She laughed breathlessly as she came, her nails digging into his shoulders. "Yes," she gasped. "Yes to everything. Yes to marriage. Yes to this life. Yes to forever with you." Afterward, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. The world had changed in ways neither could have predicted when he'd first lifted her from the rain-soaked road. He'd been a solitary merchant. She'd been a hunted girl. Together, they'd become something greater, a bridge between worlds, a new beginning. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Saving me? Giving up your old life?" Kale tilted her chin up and kissed her gently. "Every day," he said with a smile. I wake up and regret that I spent 30 years without you. But I thank the gods that we found each other. You didn't save me from the road, Vex. You saved me from a life that was nothing but an existence. You gave me meaning. You gave me love. She smiled against his lips and kissed him again, deeper this time. A kiss that promised everything. A future of adventures, of building something new, of facing the world together. Outside their window, the wild land stretched into darkness, alive with magic and possibility. The creatures of ancient legend roamed freely. The persecuted had found sanctuary. A new kingdom was being born, not through conquest, but through courage, through love, through the willingness of two broken people to heal each other and, in doing so, heal the world. When the morning came, Vex would begin her formal coronation as Queen of the Eastern Lands. Kale would stand beside her, no longer a merchant but a partner, her equal in every way. Together, they would build a new world, one where magic was celebrated, where the hunted found refuge, where love could bloom in the darkest of circumstances. But that was tomorrow. Tonight belonged only to them, to the quiet miracle of two souls who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to face the light together.